Hello, today I'm exploring the coastal footpath around North Brittany, and I've picked this bit because it's got an interesting old hut. It's also got easy parking and a beach next door, which I'm going to paint next. A very quick sketch because there was a constant queue of people going to have a look. Impressively, this hut was built in 1744. On a summer's day, it's a lovely view from the window, but I notice they have got a fireplace to help keep them warm. I'm back home with my sketch, and I'm going to talk you through how to transform a sketch into a larger painting. I've picked this particular spot because it's got nice glimpses of sea between the rocks. I'm going to wet the paper first. When I first started sketching, there was no clouds. When I came back to finish off, there were some. So I think a hint of cloud would be nice. Whilst the sky's drying, I can put the foreground in, which was all sand. I know that to my cost, because the sand is now in my palette. But I'll leave mine for now as a souvenir of the day. The sky changed when I was sketching this picture, and I'm adding a second coat of paint, which I will probably rub back with kitchen roll just to add a little bit of warmth, because the sea itself is very dark. I've got shop-bought Davies grey here, which is a good base coat, and then I can make homemade grey to go on top to give it some shape and form. So what I'm doing is just claiming the space of this big rock with a very thin Davies grey and its friend next door. And some of these have got a little bit more pink on. Just put a little there. That'll fade away to virtually nothing, but it'll give a slight difference from the white paper. My next layer is going to be homemade grey, and I'm mixing French ultramarine, Zillion crimson and yellow ochre to make the colour. I'm going to use the side of a size 8 brush just to give a dappled effect of the rock. The rock is quite weathered and speckly, so the side of the brush will just move over the tooth of the paper and give a reasonable result. Having put the homemade grey on, I'm adding yellow, which will send the paint back and give a highlighted area. Some areas of the rock are bright yellow and the bottom is very dark, so I'm just working my way around, picking out features because it will make it look more interesting. And one part of the painting will pick up the warm colours in another part. So what you've got to do is think of the whole picture. Pink on it. Don't know why. So I'm using orange, and I already had some crimson out, so I'm using that. But doesn't really matter what you use. And then the side of it is very grey. All these colours will be highlighted when I put in the bright blue sea. And there is a gap underneath, and that is the sea. I don't know how it's balanced. There must be a blob out of sight that's holding it up. And this is further away from the hut, so it's getting more sunshine. And a little bit of grey. And this one's quite grey in the background, with a yellow piece up the middle. So I'm not going to do any laboured painting on those. I'll let it dry and then highlight it. The remainder of the hut is blocks, so what you want to do is keep your brush on the move. Don't do solid lines because they are individual pieces. And you want to suggest them. The cornerstones of the building, which are the ones on the end that have got more structure, are quite different. It might be the way they're quarried, or it might be a different stone. It seems to be smaller little bits that are used in the middle of the wall. I'm now moving on to the sea, which was very, very dark, and I'm mixing Viridian and cobalt turquoise and French ultramarine. I'm drying the brush off because I want control. Do the horizon. And against the hut. The hut might not be a straight line, it might cut in between the blocks, but I can look at that in a minute. Around the rock, I'm still using the size 8 brush. And what I particularly liked was the gap. I'm just going to highlight the shadows around the capping stones on the chimney, which vary depending which side I'm looking, and then try and indicate the ridge tiles and the gaps between the roof stones. There are plants growing there which I feel that I should record, but it's just nice to indicate a little bit of the roof. You don't actually have to put in every line, just a little bit of a suggestion, and when the grey paint goes on top, it'll reduce the harshness of the lines I've put. I've just mixed some more of the homemade grey, and I've got a number 3 brush this time. I'm just going to, at random, suggest them. I'm changing my mix to a little bit more yellow to warm it up a bit, so that it shows the difference between the tiles, but not making it too obvious. Just with a little bit of water, I'm just going to drift them together. Going back to the more traditional grey now. And a little bit of yellow again. Just to make it look a little random. Back to the grey. Add a little bit of blue just because I can. And just water, dabbing it off a bit so it's not too runny. That might need a second lot of highlight, but it's got weeds growing on it, which I thought were worth recording. So it doesn't need too much work. So I'm now going to move on to a more definite grey, which is the top row of stone. When I was there, you could actually see the fireplace, but it was fleeting because the light was changing so quickly. And as I said, there was a constant queue of people going in to have a look. So what I can do is give a second brush in a few minutes when that's dry, just a stroke to show that there is, to indicate something inside. And the same with the other window. That you can see the wall, but there it is darker, so it's not just like a black hole, that you can see something. So put the base coat on and then return to it. And again with the same dark, there's a difference in depth between the concrete rendering and the stones, so that just a few little strokes like this, you don't have to detail every brick, but it gives it more shape and form. Changing my mix, I'm not going with all the same mix. If you've got too much in one area, lift it off and put it somewhere else. Just going with plain Naples yellow this time, because the sun's catching that end and it's quite light. Some of the stone is a different colour, and it may have been repaired or they may have run out. There is another one of these huts 1.5 kilometres away, which I hope to find soon, and be interested to see how that's constructed. Many countries had things like this on the foreshore, very similar to the British Martello Towers, just to see the enemy coming from the sea. And going back over the concrete render again, which isn't all one shade, it's got spots, as it were. I think where the wind and rain has penetrated the outer coating. So what I'm doing is putting some Payne's grey and blue mix on, and then using water to move it around. And then a very good way of showing the difference is to either leave it blank or add a warm colour like yellow, which will give a contrast and a chemical reaction in most paints, and send it back. So I'm going to use a little bit of chrome yellow, very watery, and I'm just going to drop it in. Just with the point of the brush, and it does the job of giving it a dappled look. Well, the same as if you left gaps, but it's nice to have a contrast between warm and cold in a picture without it making it look like it's got measles. I'm now returning to the balancing rock. When the roof's dry completely on the hut, I can put some grass on it, but I want it to be definite. The balancing rock has got shadow underneath. It's not actually just hanging on by 1 centimetre, but you still can see the sea underneath. So I'm going to be very delicate with Payne's grey. Just put shadow in. And it lips up a little bit. Well, there is a definite gap. And there's the start of a crack up the middle. So it's still balancing, but it looks more sincere now. Now this one's quite fun. It's got a hole in it. They've all got weathering marks. I'll put them in and then I can pull them back a bit with water to make them less obvious. They're mostly going one direction. That might be the way the wind is in that area. And we've got one with some speckles. I'll clean the brush off and put some warmer colour on. Some beautiful rocks around here, lovely coloured growths on them. It's quite spectacular orange lichen in that area, which I like, but the lower ones haven't. It's always a good thing to see. It shows us clean air. I'll just feather that down a bit so it doesn't look so obvious. Now the ones here, they're quite warm. I'm going to make up an orangey pink just to show that they are different. It's like a peachy colour. Just have a go at it and see what happens. I'll just use water. Highlight some, and the one behind it has got a lot as well. You've got some variety in the rocks. It attracts the eye a bit better. one pink splodge here and then nothing else. Just might be slightly different rock, or it might just be the weathering, but they've got a lot of dark marks on, which I'm using blue and Payne's grey for. I don't tend to paint with black, I tend to use Payne's grey. And this one's got quite a change in area. There's deep crevice. I'm going to go back a bit stronger because it does go under the rock in a couple of places. And there's also rocks that I can see peeking through. So I'll put those in and put a bit of yellow ochre in because they're in more sunlight, so they're slightly warmer. Now another way to lead you in, there's another rock here that nearly got forgotten. And that's got lots of sand on top, so I can put the sand around the edge. And there's a marker post here. I don't know whether it's like a trig marker or something. More research needed. An excuse for a second visit. And then there's a few more rocks down at the bottom that are just showing through the sand, only just. But it all helps break it up and make it look more natural. I'm now moving on to the grass, which is marron grass, or sometimes known as European beach grass. For the grass, I'm mixing Naples yellow, chrome yellow, and a little bit of sap green. Oh, and some blue. I'll get there in a minute. And some blue. And I've got a small brush. What you've got to do is to do it the way it grows. So I'll start on this wall and just go little strokes. Nothing too serious. Then I'll go back in a moment with a different colour in between them, which will be yellow ochre, I think, because some of them have dried up a bit. This is painted in September. It's been probably a tough summer for it there. Had some very hot temperatures. And there's a little bit dark where it meets the wall, but not too much. I'm just going to feather it where it meets the wall, just a little bit. Sometimes with a picture, less is more. And then there's a big clump where it goes onto this rock. Because it's further away, I don't need so much detail, but I do need variety. And then as it gets further away, it's getting more and more yellow. It's obviously nearer the cliff and it's had a harder time. There's no shelter for it. And what I can do is make it more clump-like by sending the top bits different directions. It's not a lawn, it's just natural cliff grass, sand dune grass really. And then it's all the way hugging up here where it's a bit sheltered and it's got a firmer hold. And that's quite dark. So I'll add some blue to that to make it a bit darker. I don't want it out of harmony with the rest, so I'll revert to yellow to tint the edges. Just a suggestion of it being darker. And then the shop bought sap green comes all the way down here. And the clumps sort of semi-meet up. Moving over to the right hand side, and the marron grass has grown under the rock and it is hugging its contour, so it's quite in shade there. So I'm going to do a darker green. Grass up. Just gives a lost edge for your eye. And then with a smaller brush, when I've found the right one, that looks all right. It's a number 3 with a point. It's got nothing on here except a little bit of water. Just flick it up a bit more gently. Giving some different directions, some coming forward. So it's a bit looser. And then the rest of the grass is sort of trampled on and smudged. So I'll do sideways strokes in various colours. And there is sand still showing through a little bit. The direction of the brush can make a huge difference. Just making like a grass pavement there. And then in the corner here it's not so trampled. So I'm adding some Naples yellow this time. And it comes all the way round to the steps. And I'm going to drop some ordinary yellow in just to give it some variety. The weed membrane that somebody's obviously put there to keep the dunes in place. I don't want to paint weed membrane, so I'm just going to make it green and a little blue. Obviously desperate measures are needed to stop erosion, but black plastic would spoil the picture. Now we've got 2 different levels now, so what I'm going to do is vertical strokes to try and show where there is a change in level. I'm not sure whether this brush will do it, but I'll start with this brush, then move on to another one. It's obviously stuck to a contour, it's where the roots are. And then I'm going to use just water to go back from that. And forward. It leaves the line, but it's a vague line. It doesn't matter if the brush is a little bit painty, because it all adds to the natural environment. So now I want to make a different colour that I haven't used yet to add the illusion of footprints. So I've got a couple of choices. I'm not sure which one will work. That was a bit too green, so I think I'll use a brown. Yeah, that works better. Just looks like the odd footprint on the sand. can use grey, but we've already got grey in the buildings. So I think brown will look just as interesting. For a little way, I'm not going to do the whole thing brown, but just give a suggestion that it's a well-trodden path. And I'm doing all the strokes sideways. Now over here, I'm going to, on the left, I'm going to do it a bit grey because there's other reflected light. And a little bit of orange. You don't want the whole picture to look the same. You need variety. So the orange is working quite well here. It's not pure orange because there were some other colours that are already started on the palette. Again, doing them sideways. And the idea is it leads you into the middle of the picture. And then we've got another area of grass that's found somewhere out the wind to grow. And I'm just making that fairly random. And there's a little bit darker area. I'm hoping that's grass and not weed membrane coming through again. So we now led into the middle where there's an awful lot of grass. We don't want it all going the same direction or the same colour. So start in different areas and make anchoring points. Work your way away from anywhere. And there are some bits that are very, very dark. Why? I'm not sure. Could be that some of it's this year's growth and some of it's last year's growth. And I don't want that to be too much in your eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm just got water on the brush and I'm feathering it back a little bit. It still look dark, but it won't be too much of a punctuation mark. I've now added the weeds to the top of the roof, darken the shadows a little bit, and just found a little bit more grass and tried to rub out as much pencil as possible. But I hope you enjoyed my painting and introducing you to the guard post at Amiens, and it's 25 minutes west of Roscoff on the GR34 long distance footpath.